Hello. I'm going to be talking about Arbitrator and what I would consider to be meta in Havoc40. There's going to be a video straight after this, which I guess strays away from, the standard meta from a lot of players. But this is what I would sort of consider the cookie cutter meta. It's basically just stacking as much damage as possible. And this is definitely more geared towards like where we are in the current Havoc meta, which is a lot of vets. Psychers are doing a bajillion damage, and you know, arbitrators, you have to pretty kind of play aggressive if you want to really get the most out of this class. Now you can definitely play it more in a hybrid role, depending on your comp, depending on the mission. You can also play it in a bit more supportive role with like Dog Aquila, which I actually find quite fun and quite powerful. But again, I would consider this to be kind of, I guess, the cookie cutter meta, like just stacking as much melee damage. It plays very similar, how you might play Ogren or how you might play Martyrdom Zealot. So anyway, I will get on with this. So starting off with weapons, same. RBD Shock Maul is extremely solid. You can pretty much use a quite large array of weapons. It's not really, you're not really locked into one with this class or with this build. But RBD Shock Maul, Carapace Unyielding, I pretty much run Carapace Unyielding on most of my ranged or my melee weapons, especially if you're a melee focused build like this one is. For blessings, high voltage execution is going to give you probably the most consistent damage. You could maybe run relentless strikes, but I don't think it fits in to the chaos of Havoc40, at least right now. Other shout outs are the Riot Shield, which I am actually a huge fan of. Opportunist High Voltage, or both damage perks are probably going to be your best bet, because that's sort of the point of this build or this class, kind of in general. Same perks, draw power output in my opinion. The Crusher is also good. Skull Crusher is really good on this class. Put on Slaughter, Carapace Unyielding. I'm not a massive fan of this weapon. I never really have been, but it is pretty good on this class. Another shout out is the Tack Axe. I have the wrong blessings on there. I would do Head Taker Brutal with probably like Flak Unyielding. I mean, you could run Carapace Unyielding too if you're running some rending on the skill tree. But anyway, for the ranged weapon, for this particular version of the build, I think the Bull Pistol definitely kind of rises above the others with how I like to play. And the reason being is lethal proximity also affects our RBD grenade, which I don't always run. I will switch between the grenade and the mine, but I'll talk about that in a minute. But if you run the shock, or if you run the grenade, lethal proximity just makes them better by quite a bit. Puncture is probably the most consistent damage blessing on it. If you are choosing to run this, which you totally can, and you're running mines, I would probably swap out lethal proximity for execution. Flak and yielding for this is my preferred perks. There you go. Exterminator shotgun. The Mark 8 is pretty good. It definitely fills in kind of the same role as the bolt pistol. It's a little bit more universal. You can kind of mixed horde clear with it if there's a bunch of ragers, a bunch of shotgunners, things like that. That part of it's not extremely useful, but it has really good range. I mean, you can just hit fire the thing halfway across the map with really good accuracy, really good damage. Same thing, Flak and Yielding. It has a good boss damage too. More so if you kind of spec into the class tree. But I mean, it's just a really good shotgun, and it's pretty ammo efficient. If you spam it, you're gonna run out, obviously, but it's just a really fun weapon. I think for this particular mark, full bore is going to be pretty much in all the time. The second blessing, I've done a lot of testing through all of the different blessings besides full bore, and I just prefer sustained fire. I think it is the most consistent among the largest array of enemies. Execution also works decently well on this weapon, but yeah, you do you. If you prefer a different blessing. That's generally what I like to run. Onto the bolt gun. I think both marks are okay. I think the older mark is a little bit better. The standard blessings will just be puncture pinning, flak unyielding. It's a really solid weapon. Always has been. One thing I don't like about it is definitely the draw time, especially on like a more melee focused build. It can be a little annoying if your teammates aren't really taking care of specials and you really need to be taking this out and trying to do that job as well as be more focused on melee. But I mean, a great weapon, both marks, honestly. For blessings, I think Shattering and Cavalcade have fallen out of the meta a tiny bit. You could say, oh, don't run puncture if you have like an Ogrin, but I think the biggest benefit of puncture is just finishing off those, the more ranged targets, not necessarily like boss damage. If you're taking this for pure bossing, this is not really the build for that. You can build like a better skill tree on Arbitrator. So I don't really consider that like it's a huge negative. I know some people do. I don't really think about that much. But yeah, it's a pretty good weapon. Onto Curios. I'll generally run 3 toughness. You can definitely run an extra stamina, so stamina 2 toughness. Because we are running push them back on this build. So we are going to be push attacking as like part of our horde clear. And if our weapon, like if you're running the crusher, I mean, you definitely do it on the shock maul as well. But if you're running the crusher, like not only are you pushing for your extra cleave for horde clear, but it's also a really good single target attack. So having that extra 3 stamina could be pretty good. I'll kind of swap between these depending on the map and whatnot. But onto the perks. My stance on them has not really changed. I think Gunner Toughness, Combat Ability are the strongest. Revive Speed did get buffed recently, and it's extremely fun to use. I run 3 Revive Speed on Veteran and Zealot because they have extra Revive Speed on their actual class tree. You don't have that on Arbites unless you're running the Aquila. So I'd still like running 3 revive speed, but having at least 1 revive speed will, like, the difference between having none and having 1 is a lot greater than having 1. The difference between 1 and 2, and then 2 and 3, and so forth. So I think having at least 1 can potentially save a run. Like, it is really strong. It has saved runs for me since the rework. It has absolutely saved runs. Either like super discreetly, like, oh, I unnetted that person before they went down in fire, or oh, I actually, like, I'm the last person alive and I got that, that full rescue off right as a mutant grabbed me or something. So it's very strong now. Running toughness as a perk is still good, obviously. I think Gunners has potentially lost a little bit of value, but when you get that Gunner seed, man, you wish you had that extra Gunner resist. I mean, at least one of them. I will generally run like 2 Gunner resist, and then 3 toughness has been sort of my go-to. Then I'll generally run like a revive speed, maybe a stamina. Stamina regen has, again, on this class, it's not too bad because you do like push attacking, but it has lost a lot of value in Havoc. I'll generally run like 1 though. I think it's generally like, I feel like it's a cutoff. Like, there are times when I'm running no stamina and it's like, oh shit, I don't have enough stamina to push that burster after I just block something or whatnot. But if you just run 1, I feel like it's just the right amount. Like, you don't really need it though. Like, none of these are really necessary. These are all sort of, I wouldn't consider flavor, but definitely restricts you from playing or doing certain things, and then if you have them, it kind of lets you do certain other interactions. Combat ability is obviously really good. I think I only have 2 on this set. I haven't really sorted these out. I thought I had new ones, but running a good mix of them is what I like to run. But you can definitely max out one. I think maxing out combat ability is probably the way to go, but I feel like if you break the line, you don't get like a super ton of value because it's such a short cooldown. But our game plan for this build, and I guess on Arbitrator in general, is to spam our ult as much as possible. So running, full combat ability is probably the play. Okay, onto the talents. No Escape versus Hammer of Judgment. Both of these are honestly pretty good. My opinion hasn't really changed too much. I still honestly kind of value No Escape a little bit more. Honestly, Hammer of Judgment is pretty good, but the extra little bit of movement speed can be pretty nice on this class. Sometimes I'll run both of these, honestly, but again, take your pick. I would probably value No Escape more, but if you just want to run Hammer of Judgment and not run No Escape, that's honestly fine. Up close is going to be sort of a must pick. We kind of have to. It's a lot of toughness on kill. Force of Will is going to be our main source of melee toughness regen. This is just a free confident strike, pretty much. It's going to work on any enemy because we're taking concussive. This is our kind of bread and butter for like toughness regen in melee. Target neutralized is something you can do without. It's definitely not a must pick, but I definitely like its sort of universal usefulness, I guess. It's really good for taking or like trying to deal with gunners. The fact that the toughness over 4 seconds stacks each time you kill an enemy or an elite is really good. It works for everything, right? Like if you are stuck at range and you can't hit anything in melee, this is going to potentially save you, right? Taking out a few shotgunners, like this is going to keep you topped up and healthy. And same thing when you're in melee. When you're killing stuff in melee, this is going to keep you topped up, both in a burst sense over the 10, but also over that 4 seconds, right? If you can keep refreshing that off of new enemies, that is a massive amount of toughness. I mean, these two perks are like, I believe 1-to-1 for the veteran perks, and they're good on veteran too. Walk It Off is going to be our sort of, it's always going to be there because we're always going to be spending stamina, but it's going to be like our main source when we're out of combat and we won't want to regen that toughness. You could run shield plates, but Walk It Off is definitely more consistent. I prefer toughness damage reduction, but considering the other perks we're taking, you could honestly run melee damage boost. Like, I might honestly do that from now on. Like, I feel like I can. I don't feel like I need the TDR, but with Forceful, the TDR is pretty nice because Arbitrator doesn't have a ton of like base toughness damage reduction, so you kind of have to be hitting stuff and keeping Forceful and suppression protocols up. So that extra 10 is somewhat nice. It's pretty nice, but you could take melee damage like low key. I think I have a few times and it's been fine. So switch these if you'd like. Okay, on to the Blitz. Ooh. This might be like divisive between a lot of people, but I know in a vacuum, the shock mines are good. In certain comps on any map, they're good. On other certain comps, on certain maps, they're really good. On other maps, they're kind of more meh. And when I say that, I mean there are certain comps and certain runs that I've done where everything has died so fast, and it's not just like a one-off. It's just the players are good, their builds are good, and I just feel like when I throw down a mine, 90% of the time, I'm not going to say they go to waste, but I'm pretty much just stacking on an effect that it's already happening, right? I think the other 10% of the times where they actually do have use, in those particular runs is, when you're being pursued by armor and there's a boss or a twin or a captain, and you can just lock down those elites and deal with the boss quick. And that's a decent amount of value. And in like all of the other runs where everything is not dying as quick, these do get a lot of value. You can throw them down every, like mixed horde or armor wave or whatever, and you're gonna get value. Like most of the time, they're really good. Now, Arbites grenades. Ooh, I really like these. These give you a lot of agency over pretty much everything in the battlefield, right? There's a Reaper. You throw one, it's dead, right? That could have killed you, depending on the situation. But there's a doorway filling up with whatever enemies. You can clear that with this. There's a teammate that's being grabbed by a chaos spawn in fire. They're gonna die. You can save them with this, right? This is not a ton of damage. A lot of the time, they can be. It can stack with buffs and whatnot, but mines are definitely better in a vacuum. That's what I'll say. I really like the Arbites grenades though. They're fun and you can definitely find uses for them, but it really just depends on who you're playing with and what missions you're playing. Gonna get toughness. Concussive is kind of gonna be a must pick for any build, not just for force of will, but for our weapon perks, etc. Suppression protocol is going to be a nice little chunk of TDR for 5 seconds when we're hitting 3 or more enemies. 10% more damage versus staggered. More toughness. We're going to take a lone wolf because I'm not a fan of the dog keystones, like even on dog builds. So this is pretty good. Going to take the impact, even though we probably prefer the cleave. Break the line. This is definitely really strong. I've been running it since day one, and it's been it's a really fun ability. But with the way that armor has been spawning and how their HP has gotten buffed, we're really just trying to stack as much damage as possible, and that's kind of what this ult does. It is selfish ult. 25% more damage for 6 seconds. Base cooldown for this ability with CDR, I think, is like 17 seconds. I know it's like 18 with 2 CDRs on your Curios, but with targeted brutality, that's 5 more seconds off. That is, you are getting this back so fast. And when we go down here and we're getting Arbites Vigilant, that's 25% strength for 10 seconds on ability use. You are getting you are getting your ability back pretty much the same time as these stacks fall off. Like it's like 12 or 13 seconds, I believe, with targeted brutality. That you're just getting a solid like 25% strength whenever you're actually able to hit stuff and use your ability and hit stuff. Like all the time. That is such an amazing uptime. The toughness and stamina honestly is pretty good. Like because you were using your ult so often, you are just constantly replenishing toughness and stamina if you're able to hit anything. Pretty good, especially since I believe like stamina regen has definitely fallen off on this class. Especially, it depends on the weapon, I suppose, but same. You're spamming this so often, like free stamina, free toughness. Who doesn't want that? Not necessary though. I ran this build and builds like it without any ability modifier. I think it's fine with this, honestly. Especially if you're running shield. I feel like if you don't have shield, this just becomes less useful. But I don't know. Targeted brutality though is obviously good. You're getting your ability back faster. It's pretty easy to hit the amount of elites you need. In today's economy, in today's Havoc economy. I don't like the extra range. I've seen so many people run this, and I feel like it's a lot of the time actively making it kind of worse. Break the line did get a buff so that you are blocking during its use. With the extra range, that use is now extended, so you could say that you're getting more value out of it. I kind of really wish that Break the Line pushed through like Ogrins, like Crushers and shit, because the fact that it gets stopped by those, I feel like just completely neuters engage in that extra distance. And I have actively watched RBDs who run the extra range go too far into a horde using it and, getting surrounded and dying. So I just don't really see a use for it, to be honest. I mean, you could say, oh, you're spamming break the line so often that the extra range sort of gives it more utility, like for movement and closing distances and stuff, but I really don't think it's worth the perk. Going down, hold the line. This triggers off of, like break the line, mines if we use it, melee hits, ranged hits if they stagger. There's more damage resistance both for toughness and health on your next melee hit. Kind of a sleeper perk. Not needed. You definitely wouldn't take it if you probably had a choice, but it's free damage resistance, which is kind of cool. Justified measures, I mean, more damage on hits. Got nerfed, but whatever. Still 10% of damage, like all the time. Keeping with the damage. 15 on dodge. Extra crit chance. Our crit modifiers on most of our weapons are pretty okay. And as long as you're killing stuff, you're going from I forget what the base crit chance is, 7.5. You're going up to 23.5 or whatever. Plus party buffs and whatnot. So you're getting a decent crit chance. You're going from a really low crit chance to a pretty respectable one. So these are all just free damage. Soul Guilt, I believe it equates to about 21 or 22% damage. I believe it scales a little higher with certain buffs up, like Skull Crusher, but don't quote me on that. I mean, this is just a really solid damage perk. It would be hard to try to take another perk over this, in my opinion. And I mean, the perks going down here are also just kind of free damage, so that's cool. Going to target the week. This is just going to be better than the other 15s on this tree here. This scales better with other buffs. If you run just this, you just had this is going to do 15. If you ran just Emperor's Fist, that's going to do 15. If you then ran Target the Weak and then Emperor's Fist, well, what do you know? Emperor's Fist is now doing more damage than it would alone. So this just makes your other plus damage buffs better. So I think this is kind of a must pick, honestly, even on other builds. Emperor's Fist is kind of a floater. It's kind of just meh. It only applies to your first enemy. The impact we don't really care about. Push them back, drive them back is really nice cleave. Weight of the Lex is 15% damage for 5 seconds after heavy melee, but it also applies to things like our grenade and our ranged weapon if we switch to them after heavy melee and attacking, which is pretty cool. Definitely, target the weak, weight of the Lex are quite good. They're quite good. Forceful. I mean, this is such a consistent amount of TDR and, health damage reduction too, but we don't really care about that as much. But again, this is just a massive amount of TDR. When you start stacking this with suppression protocols, it's it's a pretty decent amount, and Lone Wolf, but Loki, I slept on this a little bit, but then they broke execution order that one patch, and I was forced to use forcible. Because Terminus Warrant is kind of a meme, kind of works, but I've used forceful. I used forceful for a few months, and it has definitely grown on me, especially for melee focused builds, obviously, because it kind of feeds into the perks we want. But extra cleave and attack speed is going to be pretty good. Why wouldn't we take this, honestly? I guess you could not, but you can swap with Will of the Lex with Adamant Will. I kind of prefer the passive toughness regen. Having stun immunity is not too bad. Perfect blocks are kind of a meme. I mean, you could potentially clutch a run doing with Adamant Will, can be okay for things like revives, but for most of the time I'll go with Will of the Lex. And then of course Arbites Vigilant is 25% strength, like 90% of the time if you're in combat, which is just bonkers. I'm not going to talk too much about True Grit. You know, there's True Grit believers, there's True Grit haters. I'm kind of in the middle. I don't think it's a must pick by any means. It's like okay. You could technically take it over, drive them back like that. I don't think that's particularly great, but it's okay. It's fine. Strike down is also kind of good. I mean, this affects like what, Unyielding, Maniac, Carapace Flak. You could honestly take this over Emperor's Fist, and I think that's honestly pretty good. Like that's okay. You can definitely do that and be fine. You could honestly take neither too. So I'm gonna talk about some other perks here. Rebreather's honestly pretty good. If you have a pox mission, this is such a nice quality of life for those missions. Definitely thumbs up for this, for those types of missions. Street Smarts is pretty good. I mean, I'm honestly quite a big fan of it. Not necessary, but not terrible. Monstrosity Hunter, you know, bosses I'll probably sound like a broken record, but in the current meta, I feel like there's so many boss killers, and they don't even need to be like kitted out for boss killing. You know, this is not like a Marty Dom one-shot Hammer Zealot. You know, if you have crack grenade veteran, most of the time, dude, Ogryns and monstrosities are dead. Like straight up, they're dead. They're not a problem. So I've stopped running this as much because I feel like I've just not been the boss killer 90% of the time. Still a solid perk though, honestly. Target priority, same thing. You know, it affects ranged attacks and melee attacks, so that's cool. You could take like target neutralized or honestly targeted brutality, go down for something like this or this. That's fine. You could do that. I just have found a little bit more consistency out of something like this. Like this is probably what I would consider like a really solid build, in my opinion. Maybe Hammer of Judgment instead of No Escape. This could work. You could also swap for mines. Like this is kind of a do-it-all melee juggernaut in a way. So yeah, if you want to try this out, please let me know if you like it. I mean, this is by no means a unique build. The one after this is going to be pretty much me saying the same thing. So yeah, let me know.